You want to know who's truly intelligent? It's not the one quoting Marcus Aurelius over coffee or throwing around big words to win an argument. It's the person who knows when to speak and when to stay silent, the one who can walk away without creating drama, protect their peace like it's sacred, and choose their battles with intention. Stoicism teaches us that real wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. True intelligence isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what to avoid. Intelligent people aren't just chasing knowledge, they're building calm. They've learned that not everything deserves their energy, not every comment needs a reply, not every room is worth entering, and more importantly, not every relationship deserves a seat at the table of their mind. This video isn't about being clever or impressing others. It's about practical wisdom, the kind that helps you carry yourself with quiet confidence and sleep peacefully at night. If you're ready to live a life that feels lighter, clearer, and more in control, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and let's dive into the 10 things intelligent people avoid and how it might just change everything for you too. 1. They avoid pointless arguments. Intelligent people avoid pointless arguments not because they're passive, but because they've learned, often through painful experience, that most arguments have nothing to do with truth and everything to do with ego. At some point, you realize the person shouting across the table isn't trying to understand you, they're trying to win. And if you take the bait, you're not just losing time, you're giving away your peace, your energy, and your emotional stability to someone who is never going to hear you in the first place. Stoicism offers a sharp, almost surgical insight here. You don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. And it's not just about choosing peace over conflict, it's about choosing clarity over chaos. I once had a coworker who loved confrontation. Every team meeting became a battleground, even small suggestions turned into debates. At first, I thought I needed to defend myself, to prove I wasn't wrong. But the more I engaged, the more exhausted I became. Then I started paying attention not just to what he said, but why he said it. His criticisms were never about the topic. They were subtle power plays designed to provoke and assert dominance. That was a turning point. I stopped answering every challenge. I let him have the last word not because he was right, but because I had nothing to gain by reacting. Something surprising happened. The dynamic shifted. When he couldn't get a reaction, he lost control of the game he was trying to play. From a psychological perspective, people who constantly argue are often driven by insecurity. They seek control because they feel out of control inside. They confuse dominance with respect. But intelligent people, especially those who understand Stoic philosophy, know better. They know that control isn't about overpowering others, it's about mastering yourself. Choosing not to argue doesn't mean you're weak or incapable. It means you've done the math. You've calculated the cost of engaging and realized your peace is worth more than proving a point. Intelligent people don't need to be right in every conversation. They need to be centered, focused, and free from the emotional chaos others try to pull them into. That's not avoidance. It's discipline, a kind of quiet power that leaves the noise behind and moves forward with clarity. And that's what Stoicism is really about. Not just surviving the world, but staying unshaken within it. 2. They avoid over-explaining themselves. There's a draining kind of anxiety that comes from constantly over-explaining yourself, why you made a decision, why you said no, why your life doesn't follow the script others expect. Many people do this without realizing it, driven by an unconscious desire to be accepted, understood, or at least not judged too harshly. But intelligent people learn to resist this urge. They understand that explaining yourself to the wrong audience doesn't bring clarity, it invites control. The more you justify your path, the more room you give others to question it, reshape it, or poke holes in it. This behavior is deeply rooted in a psychological need for external validation. When you feel unsure, when you haven't fully owned your choices internally, you seek confirmation from the outside. But the Stoic mind sees this for what it is, a trap. Because the truth is, no matter how well you explain, there will always be someone who doesn't get it, who judges you anyway, who twists your words to fit their assumptions. You can't live freely if you're constantly managing other people's perceptions. Stoicism teaches that peace comes from within, not from being understood. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish." Let that sink in. The goal isn't to be seen as right, it's to be right with yourself. Intelligent people prioritize inner alignment over outer approval. They understand that mystery is not a weakness. Let people wonder, let them assume. Because once you stop over-explaining, you start reclaiming your authority. Your choices begin to speak for themselves, and that silence, that confident restraint carries more power than any long-winded explanation ever could. 3. They avoid being the loudest in the room. There's something exhausting about always needing to be heard. Some people carry that need like armor, filling every silence, talking over others, making sure their opinion dominates the room. On the surface, it looks like confidence, maybe even leadership. But underneath, it often masks deep insecurity. The loudest person isn't always the one with the strongest conviction. It's often the one who fears being overlooked. Intelligent people understand this. They've learned that real influence doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from raising your presence. And often, the most commanding presence is the one that doesn't need to compete for attention. Imagine a meeting where one person speaks non-stop, turning every point into a performance, while another listens quietly, taking mental notes. The loud one may be remembered in the moment, but when decisions are made, it's the quiet one who speaks last measured, composed, and often with the clearest insight. That's not by accident. That's self-mastery. Intelligent people understand the value of observation. They know that silence is not emptiness. It's space to think, to understand, and to respond from a place of clarity, not impulse. Psychologically, the need to dominate conversations often stems from a fragile sense of self. People who constantly speak are sometimes trying to validate their intelligence in real time, hoping the sound of their own voice will drown out their inner doubts. Stoic philosophy offers a very different path. The Stoics believed that a clear mind needs no noise. If you are secure in your values, confident in your reasoning, and free from the urge to prove yourself, then calm becomes your natural tone. You listen not because you have nothing to say, but because you don't need to say everything. This doesn't mean staying silent or never speaking up. It means choosing your words with care, speaking when it matters, and most of all letting your demeanor do the talking. In a world where everyone is shouting to be noticed, stillness becomes a rare kind of power. The Stoic doesn't chase attention, they attract respect. Intelligent people have no need to dominate the room, because they've already mastered the one thing that truly matters, themselves. And when you've mastered that, volume becomes irrelevant. Your calm speaks louder than any noise ever could. 4. They avoid people who drain their energy. There's a kind of tired that doesn't show up in your body. It settles in your spirit. And it's not caused by overwork or lack of sleep. It's caused by certain people who don't scream or fight, but drain you slowly through constant negativity, guilt-tripping, or making every moment about themselves. Intelligent people learn to recognize this drain early. They understand that their energy is not an open bar for anyone to take from, and eventually, they learn to protect it like it's sacred, because it is. Take Anna, for example, a thoughtful, capable woman in her 50s who had always been the strong one in her family. Her younger sister, Melissa, would call almost daily, not to connect, but to complain about her job, her ex-husband, the neighbor's dog, even the weather. At first, Anna listened patiently. She offered advice, support, even money at times. But the pattern never changed. No matter how much Anna gave, Melissa took more. It was never enough. And when Anna set boundaries asking for less frequent calls or more positivity, Melissa accused her of being selfish, of abandoning her. This emotional tug-of-war began affecting Anna's health. Her sleep suffered, her patience grew thin. She noticed that after every conversation, she felt smaller, like someone had pulled a thread from the fabric of her well-being. That's when she turned to something she had recently begun exploring: Stoic philosophy. One passage from Marcus Aurelius stayed with her. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't need to upset you. She realized she didn't have to fix Melissa. She didn't have to keep proving her love through self-sacrifice. What she did have to do was protect her energy for her own peace, for her own sanity. So she made a quiet, radical decision. She didn't cut Melissa off, but she stepped back. She limited calls, she stopped rushing to respond, and most importantly, she let go of the guilt. Because real love isn't about constant availability, it's about mutual respect. Anna began to breathe again. She read more, walked more, smiled more. Her peace returned not because Melissa changed, but because Anna did. This is what intelligent people understand. Not everyone deserves front-row access to your mind and heart. You can care deeply and still say, enough. You can love someone and still protect yourself from their chaos. That's not cold, that's clarity. That's Stoicism in motion. 5. They avoid boasting. There's a fine line between confidence and compensation, and intelligent people know exactly where it lies. They've learned that those who constantly talk about their achievements, wealth, or brilliance are rarely speaking from strength. More often, they're trying to convince themselves. Boasting is not a reflection of success. It's a symptom of insecurity dressed in confidence. The need to prove something publicly usually stems from a deeper fear that, privately, they're not enough. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology did. They believed that true power doesn't announce itself, it moves quietly, with restraint, and lets results speak louder than ego ever could. Consider David, a financial advisor in his early 60s, who had quietly built a successful life, one marked not by luxury cars or name-dropping, but by presence. In a room full of professionals, you'd barely notice him at first. He didn't command attention with volume or self-promotion. But when he spoke, people listened not because he flaunted credentials or recited his client list, but because his words were calm, thoughtful, and grounded. Others at the table would list accomplishments like trophies. David didn't. He asked questions, he listened, and without effort, he was the one everyone trusted most. What made David different was self-assurance, not the performative kind, but the kind built from experience and reflection, the Stoic kind. Boasting, by contrast, reveals a desperate need for recognition. It seeks applause before delivering value. But intelligent people, those shaped by hardship, failure, and introspection, understand that a loud mouth often hides a quiet void. They don't need to list their wins, because they're not playing for approval, they're playing for meaning. Psychologically, boasting creates distance. It pushes others away instead of drawing them in. It forces comparison and subtly tells the listener they're less. But humility invites connection. It levels the space between people and makes others feel safe to share their own stories. Stoicism isn't about shrinking yourself. It's about mastering the impulse to prove. When you live in alignment with your values, your life becomes the evidence. You don't have to sell it. That's the quiet strength intelligent people carry, the ability to let their silence build trust and their actions speak truths no speech ever could. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 6. They avoid complaining without action. Complaining without action is one of the most subtle forms of self-sabotage. It gives the illusion of movement, like something is being done when, in reality, it only reinforces a sense of helplessness. Many people fall into this habit without realizing it. They speak about what's wrong, how unfair things are, how others are failing, or how life isn't cooperating. And yet, nothing changes because the words stop at expression. No step forward is taken. No adjustment is made. It becomes a loop. Frustration, complaint, repeat. Intelligent people learn to recognize this early and break the cycle, not because they're cold or emotionless, but because they understand that energy is finite and complaining burns through it fast. The psychology behind constant complaining is often rooted in the desire to be heard, to feel seen in one's discomfort. That's valid. But over time, if no action follows, it becomes a crutch. It feeds the ego while starving the will. That's where Stoicism draws a sharp line. You can feel pain, but what matters is how you respond to it. A Stoic doesn't deny discomfort, they study it. They ask the question that changes everything: is this within my control? That question becomes a filter. If the answer is no, the complaint dies there. It's released, not rehearsed. If the answer is yes, then the next question follows naturally. What can I do about it? This is how intelligent people think. They don't reject emotion, but they don't dwell in it either. They understand that complaining, when used correctly, is a signal, not a destination. It tells you where the friction is, where the imbalance lives. But once it's pointed out, the responsibility shifts to you. Stoicism teaches that clarity comes from discipline. You don't speak about what's wrong endlessly, you decide what's next. And if nothing can be done, you move on with dignity. Complaining without action is noise. Intelligent people, guided by reason and grounded in calm, choose instead to act or let go. That's what gives their presence weight, not their words, but their ability to live them. 7. They avoid oversharing plans. There's a subtle danger in sharing too much too soon, especially when it comes to your goals. It often feels harmless, even exciting, to announce a new project, a career shift, or a personal change. But what begins as enthusiasm can quickly invite pressure, criticism, and unsolicited opinions. The more people know about your plans, the more they expect, and worse, the more you feel the need to perform, not for yourself, but for their approval. Intelligent people understand this psychological trap. They've learned that revealing plans prematurely doesn't create accountability, it creates interference. And in that interference, your focus can fracture. Oversharing often comes from a place of insecurity disguised as ambition. It's a quiet cry for validation. You speak your goals out loud, hoping that others will cheer you on, believe in you, make it feel more real. But Stoic wisdom teaches the opposite. It reminds us that approval, especially early on, can sabotage progress. When you're praised before the work is done, your mind receives a false reward. You feel accomplished before earning it. That momentary boost in confidence often reduces the urgency to act. You talk more and do less. And when the challenges inevitably come, the same people who once clapped now ask questions you're not ready to answer. Stoics like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius would advise against chasing applause, not because praise is bad, but because it distracts from purpose. They believe that excellence is something you grow in silence, away from the noise of others' opinions. When you work quietly, You build a foundation that doesn't shake when others don't understand. Your motivation comes from within, not from reaction. That's why intelligent people tend to hold their plans close, not out of secrecy, but out of respect for the process, for their growth, for their peace. They let the results speak, because they know real progress doesn't need a spotlight. It needs discipline, space, and patience. And in that quiet commitment, there is something far more powerful than any announcement could offer: lasting change, built on your terms. That's Stoicism in action, not loud, but deeply effective. 8. They avoid people who don't respect boundaries. There's a particular kind of harm that doesn't leave bruises, but slowly chips away at your sense of self. It's what happens when someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries. They may laugh it off, call it a joke, or pretend not to notice, but over time, it sends a clear message: your comfort, your values, and your space aren't being respected. Intelligent people don't tolerate that for long. They understand that the people around you influence more than your time. They influence your mindset, your energy, and your growth. And if someone continually crosses lines you've drawn, no matter how subtly, they're showing you exactly who they are. Think of someone who constantly dismisses your no as negotiable, who shows up uninvited, pressures you into commitments, or makes remarks you've asked them to stop making. At first, it may seem harmless, but repeated boundary violations aren't accidents. They're statements. They're subtle attempts to gain control, to see how much of yourself you're willing to give away before you speak up or give up. That's where Stoicism steps in with powerful clarity. Seneca urged us to associate only with those who elevate us, who strengthen our virtues, not test our limits. From a psychological standpoint, people who ignore boundaries often seek power, whether consciously or not. They want to bend others to their will, to affirm their own importance. But intelligent individuals, rooted in self-respect, don't explain or negotiate where lines are drawn. They don't try to fix the other person. They simply remove themselves. Because they know that repeated disrespect isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern. Choosing who gets access to you isn't selfish, it's wise. It's how you protect your time, your emotional energy, and your dignity. When someone shows you they can't honor your boundaries, intelligent people don't argue. They walk quietly, firmly, and without regret. That's how you keep your peace and your power. If you found these insights valuable, let me know by commenting yes below. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear from you. 9. They avoid always needing to be right. The compulsion to always be right often comes from a deeper emotional need to be seen as competent, respected, or in control. But the truth is, no one ever wins by constantly trying to prove a point. It might feel like a victory in the moment, but it leaves behind bruised egos, strained relationships, and a reputation that pushes people away. Intelligent people recognize this trap and choose a different path. They understand that being right isn't always the most important thing in the room. Sometimes being kind, being silent, or simply letting others hold their opinions is far more powerful. A striking example of this comes from the life of Fred Rogers, known to millions as Mr. Rogers. Behind the soft voice and cardigan sweaters was a deeply principled man who could easily out-argue most people in a room if he wanted to. He was intelligent, educated, and articulate. Yet what made him unforgettable wasn't his ability to correct others. It was his refusal to. In interviews and conversations, even when faced with people who disagreed with him or dismissed his gentle worldview, he never fought to be right. He listened, he responded with calm, and more than anything he showed respect, even when it wasn't returned. Fred Rogers once testified before the U.S. Senate in 1969 to defend public television funding. The man questioning him, Senator John Pastor, entered the hearing impatient and unsupportive. But instead of trying to overwhelm him with data or rhetoric, Rogers spoke softly, reciting lyrics from one of his songs and explaining the emotional education children receive from his program. His tone never changed. He didn't argue or try to overpower the senator. He stayed grounded. And by the end of that hearing, the skeptical senator, now visibly moved, responded simply, "I think it's wonderful. Looks like you just earned the $20 million. Rogers didn't win that moment by force. He won it by choosing peace over pride. This is what Stoicism teaches at its core. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're wise enough to choose peace over pointless friction. You can value truth without using it as a weapon. Intelligent people don't fear being misunderstood. They fear wasting energy on arguments that won't matter tomorrow. They know that ego may crave the last word, but wisdom knows when silence speaks louder. 10. They avoid emotional reactivity. Emotional reactivity is one of the fastest ways to lose control not just of a situation, but of yourself. When you react from anger, defensiveness, or frustration, you're not responding with wisdom. You're handing over your power to whatever or whoever triggered you. Intelligent people learn this early. They understand that not every provocation deserves a reply, and not every feeling should become an action. Instead, they practice the pause, the quiet moment between stimulus and response that separates the impulsive from the intentional. This isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about not letting emotions dictate your behavior. There's a difference. Emotions are natural, even necessary. But when you become a slave to them, you stop thinking clearly. You make decisions you regret. You say things you can't take back. You escalate situations that could have been calmly diffused. And once the damage is done, it's hard to repair. That's why intelligent people place so much value on staying composed. They don't let someone else's chaos become their own. From a psychological perspective, emotional reactivity often comes from a lack of internal stability. When you're unsure of yourself, when you haven't done the inner work, every small challenge feels like a threat. The body tenses, the mind narrows, and the instinct is to defend. But Stoic philosophy teaches the opposite approach. It tells us that true strength lies in discipline, not domination, that the calmest person in the room is usually the one with the most control, not just over others, but over themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, the emotion isn't the problem. It's your reaction to it. Intelligent people take this to heart. They pause, they reflect, and then they choose their response carefully, not out of weakness, but out of mastery. And in that stillness, they find something rare, power that doesn't shout, doesn't lash out, doesn't crumble, just steady, unshakable presence. That is what separates the reactive from the wise. That is Stoicism lived. So here's the truth, plain and powerful. Intelligence isn't measured by how much you speak, impress, or achieve. It's in what you choose to step away from the drama, the noise, the ego traps, the emotional spirals. Real wisdom lives in restraint, in walking away when it's easier to argue, in being calm when it's easier to explode, in protecting your peace like it's your life, because in many ways it is. If this video sparked something in you, hold on to it. Let it shift how you move through the world. Don't just watch and scroll. Reflect, reclaim. And if you know someone who needs this message, send it their way. Maybe you'll be the reason they breathe easier today. Drop a comment below with "I choose peace" if you're walking this path with us. And if this resonated, don't forget to like the video, hit subscribe, and tap that little bell. so you won't miss the next dose of Stoic clarity. Let's keep building this space together, a place where intelligence doesn't shout, but listens. A community where wisdom isn't just admired, it's lived. Stay grounded, stay focused, and as always, stay stoic.